Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, part of the Weirding Way Media Network.
80s TV ladies, so sexy and so pretty. 80s TV ladies, stepping out into the city. 80s TV ladies, often treated kind of working hard for the money in a man's world. 80s TV ladies.
Hello, friends. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, where we explore female-driven television shows from the 1980s and celebrate the people who made them. Here are your hosts, Sharon Johnson and Susan Lambert-Haddam.
Hello, I'm Sharon.
And I'm Susan. Many blessings to Mr. Barney Rosenzweig, producer of Cagney and Lacey, and our own wonderful producer, Melissa Roth, for helping us procure our incredible guest today. This is a dream come true. We shouted it out, I believe, in episode 1 of season 2, when we knew we wanted to cover one of the most quintessential and consequential 80s television shows, Designing Women.
Today's guest is none other than the creator of Designing Women herself. Ms. Linda Bloodworth Thomason is a creator, writer, executive producer of so many popular television shows from the 80s and 90s. She's originally from Missouri, and some of her early writing credits were on Rhoda and the groundbreaking television series MASH.
Her first episode of MASH, Hot Lips and Cold Arms, was co-written with writer-actress Mary Kay Place and creator Larry Gelbart and was nominated for an Emmy.
In 1983, she and her husband, Harry Thomason, founded Mozart Productions and created and produced highly lauded and popular television series including Evening Shade, Hearts of Fire, and The Women of the House, and of course, her most beloved work, Designing Women. She has written over 450 scripts for TV.
Miss Linda Bloodworth Thomason is also a novelist, playwright, and documentary filmmaker, as well as an outstanding philanthropist. We are so thrilled to welcome her to 80s TV Ladies. Hello, Miss Linda Bloodworth Thomason.
Well, hello. How are you?
We're great. And so delighted to have you join us today for the show. We have long been big fans, and you're definitely a hero of ours. And Designing Women is just one of my all-time favorite shows, as well as my mother and my sisters. We still talk about it to this day. So this is such a treat to be able to talk with you.
Well, I love to hear that. And I think we're like a little secret club all over America, especially in the South. But I get it everywhere I go, really. If they find out, I'm connected to Designing Women, people always have, women in particular, always have a comment, but especially mothers and daughters and sisters. And it's definitely a generational thing. Unfortunately, now I get the grandma stuff too. Oh, my grandmother, I watched that show with her. So, but it's very rewarding, to hear that it's still appreciated decades later.
Well, it's a really particular show that I think resonated with so many people in the 80s, myself included. I'm from Atlanta, Decatur, right outside of Atlanta.
Oh, so you are? How did you lose that accent? You have no accent. Where did you put your accent?
Well, I used to say when I got to film school out at USC, I sold it to an actress who needed it for a part.
That's a worthy explanation. Otherwise, I would be upset.
I have a friend who grew up in Atlanta also and has no accent. And I asked her why one day. And she said, well, I just decided I didn't want one. So, and it may have also had to do with the fact that her parents were both from England.
Oh, I see.
So that had something to do with it as well, I'm sure. But yeah, she, same as Susan, grew up there and left without a local accent.
I love the Southern accent. My husband is Southern Arkansas, almost Louisiana. And everywhere we go, people comment on his accent because they love it. It's very melodic and soft. And I don't love my own because I'm from Southeast Missouri, which is the boot heel of Missouri. And so I've tried to pick his up, but I can't. But anyway, the Southern accent, I think, was elevated on our show by all of the actors, but especially by Dixie Carter, who was from Macklemoresville, Tennessee. And she had such an eloquent way of using her accent that it actually elevated every speech she made and everything she said in the way that a lot of the very top British actors, when they do Shakespeare, I thought Dixie always reminded me of that it wasn't just a Southerner talking, it was higher than that. It was memorable. The melody was bigger, and the elocution was more contagious. You just wanted to hear more of it. So, I'm a fan of anybody who can master that.
Absolutely. The Julia Sugarbaker rant was made all the better by that accent.
Yeah, and I think it's something you hadn't really heard before on TV. You've always heard the Southern accent of, you need to get out of our town.
Mm-hmm.
That stereotype. And then the hyper feminine Scarlett O'Hara thing, I declare and all that. But I don't think anybody had ever used it the way Dixie did. And quite frankly, the rest of them too, and Jean Smart was the only one who was from Washington State, but she had a beautiful accent, and everyone on the show, she represented Charlene, who was from my actual hometown in Missouri. But she really, I had so many people say Jean's accent was their favorite. So, you can't tell how people are going to respond to it.
Did you have a dialect coach for the actors?
Not at all, because Delta, just spoke the way she speaks. She ratcheted up Suzanne a little bit, just in her speech patterns. And Annie has her own very deliberate way of speaking. It's very Kentucky, also melodic, but in a different way than Dixie's. And as I said, Jean was the only person who didn't have one, but hers was beautiful, and she fooled everybody. And Meshack was just Meshack. We never worried about if he sounded Southern. He had some Southern roots, but, he was just American, and we just didn't worry about it. Mainly, he was a black man, and he sounded like a black man, and we didn't worry about him being from the South.
That's so amazing. I love the way that you talk about the regional accents, because so much of the Southern accent is sort of genericized. And that does bug me when, you're watching a theater show or movies or television, when it's just generic Southern accent. You're like, no, there's a difference between Georgia and Tennessee and Texas and,
Or it's overdone. There was one gentleman who was a dialect coach who my husband believes that he infected at least 30 or 40 old movies, because you can tell when actors are overdoing it and it's so pronounced and slow, and he goes, oh, that guy was advising people on this movie. You can tell, because it never sounds like anyone we know. But mainly, aside from the accent, I also, when I started with Designing Women and wrote the pilot, and when I sold it to CBS, my main goal, I wasn't really thinking of accents. I was really just thinking about the South and how many wonderful, beloved people I knew in the South. And my family is from Arkansas on both sides. And, I didn't see anybody on TV like them. I didn't, and I was so tired again of that Beverly Hillbillies concept. And even in my life, I experienced prejudice out here, because I would say, oh, you need to come home with me. We have the greatest natural springs in the world, and, near my town, and this beautiful river, and I'll take you canoeing. And, everybody, my agents had seen Deliverance, and they were just, aghast that I would even think that they would set foot where I'm from. And I didn't even realize the stereotype that I was up against until I came to California, because I actually went to school in Missouri, to college. So even though it was an international school in the sense that a lot of people from different countries went there, it was still in the heart of Missouri. And I just did not know until I came to LA, how entrenched people were in thinking about the South in that very kind of scary, rural, ominous, ignorant, barefoot, sometimes incestuous way. And that was why I was just determined, to do a show that stood up against that. And fortunately, a lady named Fran Bascom, who I still say is the greatest casting director in the history of television, who did all of our shows. She's the one who found those four women. I didn't know them, and I would never have come up with them. And, she was just brilliant. And she just always came up with the perfect person. And even more importantly, the most brilliant combination of people that she had already matched in her head. And that's what she did for me on Designing Women. She is no longer with us. I could not get through her eulogy. It took me forever because I could not stop crying. Just this beautiful red-haired lady, beautiful clothes, beautiful temperament, just a joy to be around every day, and so supportive of actors and, the ones who hadn't been discovered yet, and so confident, never cocky, but so confident that they could do it. And I never saw her fail on that front. I mean, whether it was Billy Bob Thornton or Hilary Swank, who got the Oscar, who nobody knew, whether this was not on Designing Women, but on Evening Shade, Hearts of Fire. This was all Fran Bascom, the brilliant cast on Evening Shade, which actually that cast, that one could have been predicted somewhat, but no one had ever put them all together. I mean, that cast had more Oscar, Emmy, and Tony nominations than any cast ever in television history. I mean, it was Charles Durning, Ossie Davis, Hal Holbrook, Burt Reynolds, Ann Wedgeworth, Elizabeth Ashley. It just went on and on. A talent that I haven't seen before or since. And she didn't self-promote at all, so I don't think she's even known to the public. And not even that well known to a lot of people out here, but she was our secret weapon.
That is amazing. Fran Bascom, I'm going to go look her up because, we love hearing about sort of the women behind the scenes that really did a lot of the heavy lifting for this kind of stuff and don't get their flowers.
Don't get the credit. But, besides that, if you're just talking about someone on a scale of humanity, when my mother had AIDS and I would leave the hospital late at night, it still makes me cry. She was out in the waiting room. So that's just who she was.
That's amazing. And I watched a little Evening Shade, rewatched some of it, and noticed that Billy Bob Thornton is in the pilot. So I did have a question about how that came about. But now you just told me, I was like, well, he's from Arkansas, right? So maybe that was a family thing.
He is, but we did not know him. We ended up falling in love with him. Actually, he named his son after Harry. And then we went on to do Hearts of Fire with Marky Post, who's one of my dearest friends was, and John Ritter and Billy Bob. And again, Fran did that cast with those three brilliant people. And Billy Bob turned out to be just a wicked comedian, which he hadn't really done. And he and John bonded so much. And I know we're not here to talk about Hearts of Fire, but that cast too, with Leslie Jordan thrown in and the brilliant George Gaines and Ed Asner. I mean, she put that whole cast together. Billy Bob had one line on Evening Shade, but Fran came to me and said, well, listen, I've got somebody from Arkansas, so you and Harry are going to love him. And I had one line where he's a flower delivery guy, and he gives the flowers to Burt Reynolds. And it just the way he said it, he came in and said it, like Wood, these flowers are for you. Bert's name was Wood. And just the way he said it, it was kind of memorable. And Hal Holbrook went up to him afterward and said, I don't know what you've got, but you've got something. So keep doing what you're doing. And then, of course, wasn't long before, Billy Bob had an Oscar. So that just kind of shows how prescient and brilliant Fran was.
And also how kind of Hal to go up to him and say that to him, to Billy Bob. He only had one or two lines, and that's not necessarily something that, that often happens. So how awesome.
That was Hal.
Yeah.
Hal was like that with everybody. I always say he was our North Star. He so adored Dixie. I always say that there's something about Southern men and women when I don't want to make other people mad, because I know that people from other parts of the country have just as, wonderful a romance as Southerners, but there's something about Southern men and women, and Hal and Dixie personified that. that they just had the spark, and it was just unquenchable, and everybody saw it, and it wasn't different on screen. It was the same, all week on the show behind the scenes. I would say we had to, like, on show night, we had to keep him away from the microphones because everything Dixie did, he just laughed so hard that it kind of ruined the soundtrack. And he just watched her, like a besotted kid who can't believe that this girl accepted his invitation to the prom. And that was true until the end. I wrote a eulogy about them for the Hollywood Reporter. And we had so many dinners at their house, that were so adventurous. And it was like a dinner at 8 movie. I mean, Dixie always had the worst help. And, we wouldn't even eat till like midnight, and there'd always be a lot of clanging in the kitchen. And Dixie would sweep back out and say, it's almost ready. It's almost ready. And then Hal would just look at her, with a big grin, like he just thought it was all delightful. She used to come to the top of the stairs after everybody was there, and she'd come out in her dressing gown and go, "Oh my goodness, is there a party?" Like she'd forgotten. And it sounds so pretentious because it's something most people could not pull off, but they did. And you got the feeling they did that even when we weren't there. Then she'd, honest to God, lie around on the piano and sing and carry on. And it was just the most fun. But they were both so Southern. And her father, Mr. Halbert Carter, was such a close friend of ours. And he was such a character. But they kind of represented all I always wanted to have romance between the men and women on my comedies because I didn't think there was enough of that in the comedies I'd grown up with. Lucy and Ricky had to keep one foot on the floor. And I just really wanted to show people in love because that's how my parents were. So Dixie and Hal carried that on in spades. And then Delta and Joe McRaney, the very same thing. I think, like with Gerald especially, there's like in the South, maybe a lot of Southern men who have big, happy marriages, I think, have a high density of masculinity, but it's benevolent masculinity. And the women are always, high-spirited, feminine. And I mean, even my husband, I hate to brag, but I've had so many women, how do I find somebody like Carrie? And I always say, well, you have to go to Arkansas first or the South, and you should find yourself a jock who reads a lot of poetry and loves his mother and cries over the evening news, because that's Harry. And they always laugh and they go, "Oh, that's such a weird combination." I go, "I know, it's a Southern thing." So I've always tried to get that into my shows. We did it on Evening Shade again, hopefully between Bert and Mary Lou Henner, and with Hal and the wonderful Linda Geringer, who was Fontana Beausoleil on the show. But there's just, and if you look at Southern couples that you probably really admire their marriage, like Dave Hill and Tim McGraw, or Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood, Amy Grant, Vince Gill. There's a romantic spark that stays with these couples that I think is, you want it to be contagious. I mean, I think they make people want to search for that and to find it because it's so appealing. So anyway, that's something we tried to capture. And I had a lot of help with the cast that Fran gave me.
That's amazing. And you did capture it.
Yeah. Benevolent masculinity. I love that term.
We'll start it. We'll say enough with toxic masculinity. We want benevolent. I'm a liberal Democrat, and I'm all for LGBTQ causes. And, I'm writing a movie, a comedy about trans people and all of that. But I do think, we have to really savor and protect, this wonderful thing called masculine and feminine. Just because people have abused it and misrepresented it, doesn't mean we need to lose it. And hopefully really just laying it down on film in our little comedies, maybe that will help a little. So I'll always feel a little bit proud of that.
Yeah, there's space for all of it. I think, there's space for all of it. So.
Yeah, and I'm not afraid to say that because I know people are so scared now to talk about anything to do with sexuality or anything. And also there could be this spark absolutely with LGBTQ Southern people. But I'm just saying there's something about Southern men and women. I'm not speaking politically or about science or anything. I'm just saying I just believe that when Southern men and women get together and they are the right combination of masculinity and femininity, there's just nothing better in the world of romance for me, and I just believe in that. Jean is very Southern, even being not from the South. She has such a softness and such a femininity about her, but boy, is she strong. You only have to look at her in Hacks, to see the inner core of strength that comes out of her. But when you talk to her, honestly, she's the softest, most feminine woman I think I know. But yet she inhabits this great strength, just can endure anything and can give it back better than she gets. She's pretty awesome.
That is so amazing. And you reminded me, I wrote a play about Jimmy Carter, and Rosalind Carter is a character in it. And that relationship, and one of the reasons I wrote it was I was so fascinated as both a kid and then as an adult with their relationship to each other. And
yes.
That's just that Southern coupleness where they're both partners yet individuals, and there's something really.
And you still felt like, oh, I think they're going to make love tonight. In fact, I have a friend who was a speechwriter for him, and he confirmed that. He said Jimmy would be drinking wine and then talking a little bit, which shocked me. He wasn't really talking out of school, but he was talking about how he liked to have a glass of wine before lovemaking. And I thought, oh my goodness, I shouldn't even know this. But yeah. What was your play? I have to check on that too. What was the name of your play?
It's called Confidence and the Speech, and it's about the 10 days before President Carter's crisis of confidence speech, but it's told from a modern feminist perspective, looking back at that time. And in the play, the president's actually played by a woman who's telling the story of her time as a young female intern. And so the guy that's asking her questions about this time plays her as a young female intern in the Carter White House. So it's kind of a made up package for a real life event. And but I use it to talk about the confidence it takes to speak up in the room, women in politics, and
yes.
all the leaps you have to make in your head to imagine a woman president. It may have been, written right around the time of, 2016. But it's
ahead of its day that hasn't been realized even today.
But yeah.
Well, that sounds very layered and interesting, and I congratulate you on that. That sounds so original. The courage to speak in the room is something that, and I won't talk about this now. We can talk about it later. But, I did take a lot of the money I made from Designing Women and take it back to my hometown. And, we are the #1 donation spot for the NRA in my town. And I just wanted to do something for the girls. And so, I started this foundation. And that's really the big thing that we do is give people, the women, the courage to speak in the room. We've sent dozens and dozens of girls all through Europe, and every year they would go to the Broadway shows. They would come out here and stay with me and go to the sound stages. And so we're going to have a big event next year. Everybody's coming home. We've put 177 women through college, and we've sent people to Harvard and Duke, and really just, it was really my money from Designing Women that did that. I'm not bragging, but I just mean I want to make clear that it was my money came from Dixie and Delta and Annie and Jean. And so they really did that, with me. But I'm just so proud of it because the women are all coming back. Only one has passed away. So they're all saying they're coming back next year. And we're just going to have a big homecoming. But yeah, I've been getting a lot of the letters from the young girls who traveled, who wouldn't have gotten to do these things otherwise. And, they all talk about what designing women, the spirit of it, and what this money that came to them because of those women, has meant to their lives. And it's meant everything. And this all started really with me when I was a little girl. My dad gave this river I talked about that I used to bring up to my agents. It is the most beautiful river, I think, in the world. It's kind of wild. It's called Current River. And it does come from the largest natural springs in the world. And my dad loved it. He grew up on it. And he gave me my own canoe when I was 7, and he gave me the paddle. And he said, you can out paddle any boy on this river. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, And that river just became my world, whether I was paddling around in sloughs by myself or, I had a couple of girls who were like my sisters who had the cabin next door, and oh my gosh, we smoked grapevines, which are, nothing. You just smoke them to be smoking. But, we'd sit around with our legs crossed and, give speeches and talk about everything. And we were big readers. But anyway, that I always think about, that gave me the confidence to speak up in the room, was just the fact that, I owned that river and I did race all the boys on that river in my canoe. And so just the template of that, I just kind of wanted to, bring back to my town and give all these girls a leg up, which I think they really got, and I'm anxious to see them in person because I haven't seen them this started in 90, about 1990. So I'm really anxious to see them all and see what they're doing.
That is amazing. Okay, we want to keep talking. We're going to take a short break. Okay, we're back. Is this the Claudia Foundation?
Yes, the Claudia Foundation is the umbrella of it because, my mom came from, didn't have a sister. Her mother died when she was 13. This is in a little tiny town, Alicia, Arkansas. And she grew up, really didn't get to go to college because her dad didn't have the money. And she came to the last place they moved was Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And they came over the Arkansas line. She'd grown up in Arkansas. But anyway, she was the secretary for my dad's, he was a lawyer, and he came home from the war, and there she was working for my grandfather. My grandfather's the one who's really responsible for me becoming a writer. He only went to 6th grade, and he wanted to be a lawyer, so he studied and clerked under a judge. And then he became a lawyer, and then he became a newspaper editor. And then he became what today would be called a civil rights activist. And he is really responsible for the liberal spirit that I hope exists in my shows. His name was C.T. Bloodworth. He was about 6'4" with white shock of hair. My favorite picture of him, he's in a Venice canal in a gondola with his Stetson in the air waving it. When he died, I got all of his books, Thackeray, Shakespeare, Dickens. He had 4 sons. They were all so interesting. They put themselves through law school by playing poker. And they defended him when he got in a huge fight with the Klan. My grandfather defended and was found abhorrent, that they were tarring and feathering Black people, running them out of town. This was in Corning, Arkansas. So they had a lot of shootouts at my grandmother and grandfather's house in Arkansas. The governor would come. I mean, it was a huge thing. It went on for years. And finally, they did shoot my grandfather in the chest, and he lived, but he moved his family just across the state line to Poplar Bluff. That's why I grew up there. So then his sons grow up, and my dad became a Japanese war crimes prosecutor, and my uncle Charles, was a judge advocate at Nuremberg. And he brought home the transcript from the Nuremberg trials that was written in hand. And we gave that to the University of Missouri. But all the sons became lawyers, and it was the largest family law firm in Missouri in the 50s. But the way they were different is that, they always came, they were interested in social justice, and they had read a lot. And all of the boys could recite, Longfellow and Shakespeare. It just went on. And I grew up being around that. I never mastered that myself, but it was just common. They would get out their cocktails, and if it was sunset, somebody might be reciting Tennyson. Now, I'm not saying they did that every day, but I mean, it was in our lives, and it was interesting, and they were interesting, and they were always very aware of what was going on in the town. And my dad was really alone in a lot of his opinions. Nevertheless, people loved him. He was a very popular person. But, we couldn't join the country club because blacks and Jews couldn't belong, that kind of thing. Then when he died, I said that in his eulogy, and my mother said, well, he also didn't want to pay the dues at the country club. I looked like my dad. My mother looked like a movie star. And because she didn't have all of this female support, I was everything to her. I was her only daughter. I have a brother also. But anyway, when I, was AIDS, she died of AIDS in 1986. And the day I found out that she had AIDS is the day I found out that Designing Women was going to be a series.
Oh my.
And so it was very, very, hurtful and awful. For 6 months, she died Thanksgiving of that year, and my husband's mother died 4 weeks later. So it was a pretty horrible year. But they canceled Designing Women, and my husband came out here and saved it. And he got Viewers for Quality Television, behind him. He got 50,000 letters to come in, and he got Bud Grant, the president of CBS, to raise the white flag at CBS, literally raised it, which would never happen today, and said, okay, we're going to give you another chance, because they had been moving it around and they hadn't given it a chance. But anyway, my mother, yes, I wanted to honor her so much because she, just gave me everything. My dad gave me my confidence, but my mother just poured all the love in the world into me. And, that is part of being confident. I think giving someone confidence is to just love them up every day. I've never felt like, I had to get a man or be anything, because I felt so loved, from her. And so, like being married and being happy would just be icing on the cake, because I was already good to go, just from being around her. So I wanted to kind of give that love to the girls in my hometown. I did a film for Hillary. I was very close to Hillary Clinton's mother, Dorothy Rodham, who stayed with me a lot at my house in Santa Barbara. And they had basically the same relationship. Her mother grew up in a very impoverished environment, and to teenage parents who were 16 years old who could not take care of her. She was given to a family, California relatives who were very unloving. And yet somehow she invented love, and she figured it out, and she just filled Hillary with love. And that gave her all the confidence to be who she was. And in 2016, I made a convention film for Hillary that was online. And it told their story about Dorothy inventing love and giving it to Hillary, and then Hillary going all over the world, and helping girls in Afghanistan and women who are living in poverty all over the world, and the misogyny that keeps women down all over the world. All of that came from a mother and a daughter. And so I tried to kind of duplicate that, with my own mother, and hopefully on a smaller scale, have done kind of the same thing.
I love the idea that you don't have to take sort of abuse and terror and fear in your life and continue that. You can actually turn that and decide you're going to make a decision to make sure that the people that come behind you and the people that are around you are going to be filled with love.
You can interrupt it.
Choice.
Yeah. And that's what Dorothy Rodham did. I know the show's not about Dorothy, but I love her so much. I have an English garden at the foundation that's dedicated to mothers and to Dorothy and to my mother. Dorothy, at 6 years old, was on a train. You might know this story because Hillary has talked about it. She was on a train to California with her little sister, who was 3, alone on a train from Chicago for 3 days. The stories that make me cry the most are the ones where women help each other. Because I do think things are so stacked against us all over the world. And, I won't make my big soapbox speech here, because that's not what it is. Kind of, I know it's what you all are about.
It is what we do. Go
we got to
ahead.
get some comedy in. We got to get some comedy in here. But no, just that, our national hobby is obviously killing and raping women, and then making shows about it and documentaries about what was in the killer's mind. And I'm just so fed up with all of it. It's really a celluloid holocaust, of what we do to women, and then the way women are treated all over the world, whether it's the Taliban or it's the pornography industry, that is now commensurate with really the arms sales. It's the biggest business in the world. I just feel like women, and I feel like we're going backwards too, and I won't get into all of that, but it's very disappointing, and women are just constantly over sexualized now, and it's the side boob, it's the under boob. Have you seen this? I'm not afraid of nudity, but why is this the only thing, that's being constantly presented everywhere? I just feel like, I don't want to be like old lady Bloodworth screaming, "Get off my lawn," or "In my day." Just the Kardashian thing, just constantly, oh my God, here I am. Here's my ass. Look at my ass once more. I watch the show. I know them. I've been to their house to dinner. I try to kind of keep up with the Kardashians, but enough is enough. In the show, one of the shows I saw recently, they found a book in an old box in their garage, and they were so puzzled. No one knew what to do with it. It was a book. I was screaming, "Read it, read it." Anyway, enough. Okay. Thank you for letting me get that in.
Oh my
but
God.
you're absolutely right. I mean, even to something like, Vanity Fair does this cover every year of, up and coming people in Hollywood. In some years it's all men, some years it's all women, sometimes it's a combination. But in the year that it's all women, all the women are dressed in lingerie or bathing suits or whatever. And then the men, they're all in T-shirts and suits. And it's so maddening.
I don't understand it. And then when they do their Oscar shows, they've got Sofia Coppola halfway lying on a bed with her legs up, with her pants pulled down. I'm like, oh my God. Well, when did Marty Scorsese do this? When he was nominated? It's just so, I don't care. Everybody can be naked. I'm fine. Human body can be beautiful. We get it. But what is the purpose? What is the message? I don't understand it. And this latest HBO offering, Lily Rose Depp, is completely naked for the entire series with her legs spread, with him looking like he's giving her some kind of gynecological exam, and then, abusing her in so many ways. And then they rush in to say, oh, but we're showing you that that's wrong. We're teaching a lesson. Well, of course that's wrong. We don't really need to hear that you're concerned parents or concerned producers. We know what you're doing. And for that to fill in where Succession was, come on, that was shameful. So anyway, I went over between looking at The Idol on HBO, and I switched over. And on another channel was Harrison Ford in Witness, watching Kelly McGillis prepare to take a bath. And he was at the door and she didn't know it. He was just looking at her so lovingly. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm sorry for all the young people looking at this other trash, that they might not see these things. Harrison is old and that's an old movie. But, that kind of, really carefully, brilliantly constructed sex scene is just so erotic and appealing, I think. So much more than just, what is it now? Every love scene is just slamming a woman around the room, choking people, choking women. I don't get that. Like, I asked my husband, does anybody just make love anymore? Like, it doesn't even exist in filmmaking anymore. I know we're way afield of designing women.
This is a whole new podcast.
You can tell I've been cooped up during the pandemic. But anyway, it kind of does stem from the kind of, romance we were trying to show. On behalf of the women who like designing women, I would like to appoint myself one of their representatives to say, ladies, please stop taking us backwards. We can do a whole podcast. What has happened to women? That's what we can call it.
Oh, and you're so right. That scene in Witness between Kelly McGillis and Harrison Ford
You
is like
remember
one
it?
of the hottest scenes in movies.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If only young people could be exposed to these things. And I think their world is smaller, maybe than ours was, at least for girls. Because I'm older than you ladies, but, when I was growing up, the world was our oyster, and we were running free. We did what we wanted. We said what we wanted to say. We loved who we wanted to love. We were really wild in that sense. And, I just see girls trying so hard to be, I'm going to say the word lovable because that's what's used in our industry constantly. Is she lovable? Is she hot? I see women as that is their greatest aspiration. And it makes me sad. There's just so much more to life than this over-sexualization of everything.
It's pornography. We didn't have
really
pornography available, like 5-minute pornography available to us on the internet freely.
Yeah.
Now, by high school, they've all seen pornography, and we know that that's where women are getting beat up for the first time. They see it. That's what it is, and they're being taught that's what sex
and they
is.
replicate it.
That's
and
correct.
And young boys begin to think that's what you do to girls.
That's correct.
I just think, I think there's a lot of people in America who feel this way. And I think the conservatives in our country would be surprised to know that a lot of liberals like me feel the same way. And this could be a meeting ground, for all of us. If we can't agree on Donald Trump or January 6th, let's agree on this. It's a starting place. Let's start teaching our kids, let's start teaching our boys that this is really not, how things are supposed to be, and teaching our girls that they are worth way more than this ridiculous over objectification, of their genitalia and of their bodies and of their sexual beings. I just feel like a lot of girls just aspire to this now, and I do everything I can, in my little town to get the girls not to feel that way. Okay, this is another podcast because we barely talked about it.
And I have 2 stepchildren and then a 10 years younger boy. And you want to raise good people. And it's very challenging right now because there's so much cruelty in the air.
Cruelty is a good word. Thank you for saying that. It is cruel. What they're doing. I'm so glad you said that. A lot of this stuff, I think girls have become very confused that they confuse cruelty with masculinity,
Yeah.
They think if the guy treats them poorly, that's sexy until they can't take it anymore or they're dead,
Yeah.
and when we were, and I don't know, I always thought, I think kindness is probably the sexiest thing around. That's what I think about my own husband when I see a man like Brad Pitt or George Clooney. A lot of the actors who I know are kind, like Keanu.
Yes.
Keanu, I was when I guess because of my canoe.
You want to make it a canoe. Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I find sexy because they're so kind to people. That's a turn on. And now I think that's interpreted as weakness. Like during the pandemic, you're not as social and you watched a lot more TV, which is what happened to me. I saw a lot more of what is out there. And it made me feel lonely and sad and depressed that, how will you ever fix this? Well, okay. These young people, they may never get over this. This is what they think and this is what they feel is hot and sexy. And I don't think Hollywood does anything to help.
No,
I was chosen. No, they're the cause of it. They're the cause of it. Absolutely. And I brought this up at the Academy of Television Arts and Science because I had 1 year on the board. Every year the president gets to have a guest, and I was chosen by the president of that year to be the guest. And I don't really like organizational things too much. I mean, I don't enjoy it. I don't join a lot of clubs, but I went, and I made my little speech there, and I said, I'm not advocating censorship, but I'm just saying we can do better. Like does the actress really need to walk naked on Game of Thrones down the street naked? Why is she the only one? Why is she the woman doing it? These are just examples of even the most prestigious cable organizations do this crap. And I'm just saying, think about it. I know you see yourselves as, the most liberal, open-minded people in the world, and you do this. You continue to do this. It's denigrating women, and you do it because you can. And I don't want to pass a law that stops you. I'm just asking you to consider, maybe don't do it on, at every opportunity. Maybe turn it down for your daughter or your wife or even your mother. Maybe don't do that. And, it was not well received. And the arguments went on even when I got back to my office. I still had, I won't say who, but the head of a major network called me, and we had quite a long argument because I, made him feel defensive. He called me to tell me that he hoped his own daughter would be president. And I said,
of what country?
He was so defensive because they don't see themselves that way,
And you hit a
they
nerve.
just think it's art. It's art. Yeah.
Yeah, you hit a nerve.
Yeah.
You called him on it.
I hit a nerve.
Yeah, because
And he's a very cool guy.
yeah,
He's a cool network, a cool guy.
it may be art, but it's for me, it's about the balance. If there was a balance to all of this, then fine. But there's no balance. It's very tilted.
It's very tilted, and women are losing this battle. And, if you say something, you're not going to be cool. You're going to sound like Tipper Gore when she got after the music industry for bad lyrics. But, come on, listen. Have you listened to some music? The violence toward women, the horrible descriptions of their genitalia, what they're going to do to women. And then all these big corporations are giving them millions of dollars. I don't know. It's just a whole, all of the entertainment industry is riddled with this misogyny, and nobody wants to talk about it because we're supposed to be the supportive, liberal-minded, feminist people. But, we're kidding ourselves because we're going backwards. So, and it is really kind of relevant to your podcast, although I know there's no way that this can be part of the Designing Women.
You'll be surprised if you think
we're just going to make a
but,
career out of this interview.
But I just think, well, you could pick this up and kind of have this be a tributary of, the river you've been riding, back to the canoe metaphor. Because it is so important and it is connected. We have seen how television changes the world. We have seen how television changes the world for women. And my three mentors when I started out, who were Norman Lear, Larry Gelbart, and Jim Brooks, and I had no idea because I was so young. I was just out of college. I had no idea that was an incredible thing that had happened to me. Now I get it. I mean, it's like winning the $1 billion lottery. And there weren't that many women comedy writers. And my partner was Mary Kay Place. And we were kind of exotic because we were just cheerleaders from Oklahoma. We didn't come from an urban environment, and we were trying to be funny and to be real serious comedy writers. So what I found out, though, is here's Norman Lear, changing the world racially, changing the way people feel about Black people. And then here's Larry Gelbart changing the way people feel about war. And there's Jim Brooks changing the way people feel about women and the way women feel about themselves with Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda, which I grew up on. And so I just see how powerful it could be because I lived it. I saw it. I participated in it. I got to work with all those men. And I honestly feel like Norman and Jim and Larry changed the world more than most legislation can do. And so it breaks my heart now that we still have even more ways to reach people. Never could you have imagined from the 4 networks. We have 500 outlets now, and this is what we're putting on it, and it's a real squandering of an opportunity that wasn't available, for hundreds of years. And now we have it. Now we can reach everybody, and we can change the way men think about women and women think about themselves. And we're just not doing it. Instead, we're reverting back to, this toxic masculinity all over the world, and women better be quiet and, do what we say. And that's what's happened. So I'm just hoping, that there'll just be more and more. Yes, there's some beautiful things on cable, but just more and more brilliant, edgy, original, new things for women that are not over-sexualized. And what is the chance for that? Right now, I feel like it's pretty slender. What do you all think?
2 words.
Okay.
Barbie and Oppenheimer. I can't even describe my frustration and anger that those are like, they came out in the same day. They're being touted as like the best.
Barbenheimer. Yes.
Yeah. Barbenheimer. I mean.
Well, the critics are all little boys now.
Is that it? But it's just so weird. It's that the femininity and then like destroying the planet. You know what I mean? Really? That's all you guys got?
You guys are so good at condensing my rambling, because then after I'm done, you'll just go, one word, pornography. That's exactly what I've been trying to say. And then you just did it again. Yeah, I think, but what are we going to do? And we can see this happening to us, to our daughters, and to, all the women we care about. We can see it happening in front of us, but we're not stopping it. One reason is I think people publicly women are very afraid of being considered not cool and not sexy, and I know actresses are very much afraid of being labeled, oh, she's trouble and she's not hot. Nobody wants to be not hot. If you're not hot, you might as well be dead. And so, unless you can be Maggie Smith or somebody like that, for all the women in between, like between 50 and 75, very dangerous area to still be hanging around. There's a lot of women on the precipice who are getting ready to go into that dark tunnel, where they pick you up in the van and take you to Palm Springs and throw you out in a ditch. That's kind of what's coming. And, because we've done nothing to change the perception, there are still cultures that revere older women. Unfortunately, we're not one. And the interesting thing is, I just think there are millions of us, but we're not organized, we're not organized. And I don't, at some point we get old and tired and we go, good luck. I think already.
It's your turn now.
Yeah. But all you can do is your little corner of the world and make it better.
Exactly.
And make it more beautiful and make it smarter, make it more unafraid, like the unafraid girl, make it brave. And when I first got my first big check from Designing Women, I called, my town is not a very pretty town. And the girls, I felt, had nowhere to be, to just be themselves and to read and to spend an afternoon and to have access to things that the public library doesn't have, just like beautiful coffee table books and, learn how to cook food other than what was really, native to our area. So anyway, I called Crowther and Sion, who are the 400-year-old English architects who did, the Queen's architects, I should say. They redid Windsor Castle. They are, responsible for all the palaces. And I said, I'm here in the Ozarks, And I would love for you to build a big English library for all the girls in my town because I think they're the most beautiful rooms in the world. And could you do that? And they said, oh, ma'am, we don't even know where you are. What are the Ozarks? And so they looked it up and they called me back and they said they would do it. And they built it in England, came across the Atlantic, came down the Mississippi River by barge, came to my town on flatbed trucks. They lived in the town for almost a year and they reconstructed it on my grandparents' house next to it. And then we redid the entire thing, but the library stands on its own. I have Lord Byron's fireplace, beautiful things. And and then now we're just now then I got involved in politics, so I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do. But now we're doing the English Gardens, and I think we're going to be on tour America, I hope, and have people come see it. But meanwhile, this is where, all the girls can come, and they've, through the years where they've met and they've, gone on their trips and come back. It's really like a big clubhouse, for the girls. So I feel like as I'm getting older, okay, that's going to exist forever. Nobody can take that away. And there's a philosophy that I think we've instilled in the girls that they'll pass it along to their daughters. So how many girls does that make, altogether? Well, we've probably affected maybe 500 girls, but maybe that will multiply. And I guess that's the way we'll have to do it. Do you all feel like a lot of girls who are of the same mind as you, and that makes you feel good about the world?
I am astonished at the generation that's happening and coming up, the younger generations. Because as much as they're being fed consistent, messages of cruelty and pornography and also just damage, they're the kindest people
ever.
My kids and their friends are so kind to each other, so supportive, and maybe they're a unique particular batch, but I think that the challenge that we're in, and that is very hard for me and what I assume my generation to be, is we're in this transition. And so the access to so much kind of horror and pornography and sort of terribleness is also in the same pipeline as access to other cultures, other people, other understandings, and vast communication that can be misused, but can also be used to communicate with like-minded people, to sort of spread the message that, that gender is a different conversation for the younger generation, and in a way that's much more accepting of who you want to be and how you want to be and when you want to be it. And so I actually have a lot of hope for that generation, though I think they're being damaged. Like, I think that it's that weird conundrum of the internet and of this fast communication where we're being, sort of pummeled with really kind of horrific things. And yet it's also accessible to find someone who loves what you love wherever they are. And if you're alone in your town and love whatever it is that you love and no one else loves it, you can find somebody online who loves it too. And you can recognize that community and be in community with that. And so I think it's going to be a very tumultuous few generations.
Yeah.
But when I'm looking for hope, right? And I'm a big optimist, I think of 80s TV ladies, and Melissa's rolling her eyes at me right now, I'm sure, but
not really.
No, I'm hearing you. I like what you're saying. I think it's so clear what you're saying, is that there's a kind of a war going on for the soul of our girls. Yes. And I do understand both sides because you explained it.
Yep.
So perfectly, that everything I've been complaining about and you all are saying, amen, we hear you, we feel the same way. I'm so glad you said that because this is the other conversation I've had with my friends, is that we are gobsmacked by how compassionate and empathetic these young girls are. That they want inclusiveness. They will not stand for anybody being bullied or ridiculed. I think, oh my God, these are like just what you said. These are the kindest, dearest people, and they feel so deeply but yet there's this other thing happening to them, an assault on them, really, where you feel like because of not only the internet and the pornography, but just the way, the entire, media industry of the world, is presenting them and over-sexualizing them in a way that just summons them and beckons them to try to be that creature, or you're not worthy, and it's got to be so confusing. It's like they have kind hearts and deep convictions about what is fair and how everybody has a right to be at the party, but yet they're being told, well, if you want to be at the party, get your clothes off and, saddle up because, this is the ride you're going to get. It's very interesting that you pinpoint it that way. And I don't think anybody really has that I've heard. I haven't read anything like that, but I think you've hit upon something.
Well, it's part of the reason, the deeper reasons of this podcast are looking at, these shows that we loved and having a good time with them. I promise we will get to that good time. But also because
this is more important.
This is important conversations because this is how do we get here? We should be in a better future for our kids. We shouldn't have just pushed back women's rights 50 years. We should have been pushing them forward 50 years, and it's all tied. It's tied to this sort of, what I would say is sort of an out of control capitalism. It's tied to sort of this pushback against great strides for LGBTQ and people of color and Black people and women. And now suddenly there's this giant, oh no, we're going to shut that down.
Yes.
Or we lose, generations. And it is a fight that has come to a certain precipice. And yet it's also tied to the strikes, the actor strike and the writer strike. It's tied to worker strikes and workers going, wait a minute.
And the greed. The corporate greed.
And the corporate greed. It's corporate greed. It's also just this cultural greed and controlling the information. And I'm sure we better get to a conversation where we're talking about people in power doing damage personally to people as if it's their right. And that filters down in the messages that they have sold us over the years and the stories that they have prioritized, and that making sure that, we're going to make it edgy by doing all of our exposition while women are naked.
Yeah.
And that's going to be art. And don't worry, maybe we'll show you a guy too. Like, it's fine.
Yeah. That's what they do. Thank you. They show one guy's behind. Yeah. Yeah. And then we're good to go for about 3 months where another one has to get up to bat, so to speak. Yeah. That's, you should have a podcast.
Oh, thank God you said that.
No, but really, you're so smart. That was everything you just said is so true. At the base of it, though, since you have been so good at condensing what I've just said, I would, if I was looking through a little telescope right now for who is the real offender in all of this, it would be the white, out of control, pissed off, toxic, masculine guy who is now stomping around all over the world, and they're the people, I'm not saying they control the purse strings, but they are the people who are providing also big pushback on women, Jews, Blacks, LGBTQ, because they're losing their power, and that's what was happening on January 6th. That's what's happening all around the world. And, we, the people who work in television, could have a big influence on that. It can't just be with elites coming on CNN, and saying, oh, woe is me. We don't change minds that way. We've got to do programming that's really smart and brilliant and appealing. And I have to hand it to Taylor Sheridan. What he's been doing with 1883 is showing a real America, and that fearless girl who rides that horse every week, is just incredibly appealing and beautiful. that's the way we change their minds. Nick Kristof always says, you can tell Americans that 50,000 people are dying of starvation in Africa and they won't send a check, but you tell them one story and that check will be in the mail. And I think, just talking about how women can, start to elevate themselves again. And people always go, oh, well, a little sitcom shouldn't trouble itself, how pretentious to change the world. And once again, I give you Norman Lear, Jim Brooks, and Larry Gelbart, or even in our own way, just on Designing Women. We did The Strange Case of Clarence and Anita, and CBS, Jeff Sagansky was wonderfully supportive of us, said, hey, he's a big Republican. He said, hey, if it's funny, do it. I'll put it on, and I did. And I think I know from my mail, it's a lot of people off, and it made a lot of people change their mind, and believe Anita Hill. I don't know. I'm just saying we have more tools than we've ever had to change the world, and we're just not using them, We're not using them properly and with the respect that they just, they talk about far reaching. There's almost nobody we can't reach now. But we just keep putting the same kind of, some of it's brilliant, but so much of it is setting women back, and we don't have to do that.
Yeah. I would have to say, because I was trained on, say, some really amazing 80s TV ladies, I'm going to put you in that category of changing things between Designing Women and for women to find their voice and make those connections. I was trained on how to speak by 80s television, and particularly the women of 80s television. So I'm putting you in that category with Norman Lear and James Brooks with the shows that you created. So we should probably talk about them.
You want to take a little break just for
Let's take
a minute?
a little break.
That was a nice segue.
Yeah, excellent segue.
So obviously our discussion with Linda Bloodworth Thomason continues, and it is so great we are making this a two-parter. I don't want you to miss a bit of it.
Please tune in next episode to hear part 2 of our deep discussion with her, where we really do get to more Designing Women stories, and we solve all the deep problems of misogyny.
Okay, well, maybe not really, Sharon, but we talk about them, and the first step to solving a problem is identifying it. Seriously, if you loved part 1, you're really going to love the second half of our in-depth interview with Linda Bloodworth Thomason. Please join us.
Hey, we want to hear from you. What's the 80s ladies-driven TV show that you remember or have heard of and would like for us to cover?
Tell us your thoughts at 80stvladies.com.
And please help us make the show by going to patreon.com/80stvladies. As always, we hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous old and new shows to watch, all of which will bring us closer toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century. See you next time.